I'm your host, Eric Eisenberg. Welcome to Hero Blend number 17. This week we finally got our first look at Ben Affleck's Batman from Zack Snyder's Batman vs. Superman, and there's a lot to talk about, so stay tuned. Hey everyone, welcome back. This week we finally got to see the brand new Batman costume from Zack Snyder's upcoming Batman vs. Superman. And for the conversation, I decided who better to talk to than Tony D'Amato, who's a very good friend and professional storyboard artist. How's it going, man?
Hey, really good. How are you?
So let's talk Batman for a minute. First off, I know you're a huge Batman fan. Just in general, what are your kind of thoughts about this costume?
I have kind of mixed feelings, but for the most part, I feel like they finally got a Batman costume right.
Okay.
So, I mean, it kind of reminds me of back when, Batman Begins was going to come out.
Sure.
And I was looking forward to seeing a suit that was more like, simple and just kind of looked like how in like Batman Year One, just sort of like a cloth pulled over Batman with a big fat black suit.
Yeah, totally.
And how I wanted that costume so badly, and now we didn't really get that with like the Nolan versions.
Yeah, because it kind of got a more armored version, kind of a bit more practical.
Totally. Yeah. In a way, like this is kind of the perfect Batman costume, and it's kind of like something that I think like a lot of fans have been wanting for a really long time.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, just from your perspective as an artist, I mean, say you're drawing a Batman that looks like this. I mean, what would you say we can probably expect from a Batman that has this kind of visage, this kind of shape?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, like, I have to say, like, first of all, like, I've never been a fan of like seeing muscles in superhero suits.
Okay.
Because it's just not the way that cloth conforms to
a human body. Yeah, absolutely.
Unless it's sort of like molded in the armor or something like that. So it always is kind of weird when it kind of reminds me of like '90s comics when like you would be able to see like all the details of the muscles through the suits, and then like sometimes like veins in the arm. And the
whole Rob Liefeld era kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just like ridiculous. So
But I think at the same time, I mean, this suit does have kind of those muscle rips. I mean, he definitely has the abs. But I think it is a bit more subtle than, especially like Schumacher, for example.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
But let's talk like kind of from top to bottom, because the first thing I want to talk about is the cowl, which I absolutely love.
I do too.
You have like these very short ears, which are very almost Frank Miller-esque. What do you think about that kind of change? Because we haven't really seen that before.
Yeah, no, I love it. I've always preferred the short ears to like the big giant devil horns.
Yeah. And it almost makes more sense in a practical sense, because I mean, if Batman's going to be sneaking around, he probably shouldn't be dealing with giant ears.
There's something very badass too about just having like a big guy with these kind of like short ears.
Yeah,
for some
totally.
reason, I really like that.
And also something about kind of the width of the character almost makes you feel like this is a guy who would stab you with those ears if he's given the chance. But let's also talk. I actually do want to talk about the color a little bit, because the photo that Zack Snyder sent out was, it would appear black and white, which makes the entire costume look black and white, which, I mean, or I should say black, which we've been seeing mostly ever since, like, Tim Burton, with the exception of the splashes of color. Schumacher, let's not talk about that. But do you think that we should be, like, should this costume be black and white, or would you rather see a colorized version?
I think ideally I would want it black and gray.
Okay.
I think like that would look best on screen and be subtle enough but like different enough. I have seen colorized versions of blue and gray which look fantastic.
Yeah.
I think the danger you run in almost being too accurate to the comics is it kind of starts to look like cosplay.
Okay.
And sort of like almost like this was like a YouTube like fan film, because like that's just the accuracy.
Exactly, they're trying to directly translate, and that it doesn't always necessarily work from the page of screen. That completely makes sense.
Yeah.
And actually, kind of along those lines, one thing I did notice about these suits specifically is that the utility belt actually appears to be just as dark as the rest of the suit, and that's always been kind of something that kind of pops out. It's always been the yellow. Even Christopher Nolan's Batman had the gold belt.
Sure.
But it's weird that they appear to be. I mean, obviously, again, we haven't seen the full colorization. But it does kind of look like a bit more monochrome than we're used to seeing.
yeah, I hope it's, you know, brown.
Yeah. Yeah, brown would be nice. I mean, just something to kind of break up the idea of the colors and stuff.
Yeah, totally. I love it. Yeah.
But let's talk about Batmobile a little bit too, because I'm very excited by this. I think it kind of strikes a balance somewhere between the Nolan Tumbler and kind of this armored military vehicle, and and kind of almost the Burton-esque kind of like longer car, but it is still a vehicle. I mean, what did you think about that?
I like it. I've loved the Tumbler for some reason. I like the utility of it, the practicality of it, but it's cool to see like kind of like more of like a comic book style Batmobile.
Sure.
You know? It kind of gives you a hint at sort of maybe the direction or the look that this movie will go in. That is kind of going a little bit more into the comic book direction than, you know, the practical.
And I'm totally okay with seeing that. I mean, especially if they're going to be. I mean, the costume does remind me a lot of the Frank Miller comics, and if you're going to go in that direction, I mean, there are a few better places you can go for sources of inspiration.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, Tony, final thoughts on the new Batman costume?
I think like the bat symbol gives me a little bit of a pause.
Okay, like the little very broad, yeah.
It's not totally Frank Miller accurate.
Sure.
It's a little bit like too long or something. It sort of looks like something on a medieval flag.
Sure. And the wings don't even necessarily look like wings. They kind of just look like big blocks.
Yeah. But yeah. Good. Much better than the Nolan symbol, I have to say. Yeah.
Well, it's very different. I think it stands out most certainly from everything big screen versions of Batman we've seen so far. Excited to see more. Tony, thanks so much for joining me this week, man. And we'll see you guys next week. Thanks.